Today I'm here with my Belgium colleague Job, and I'm happy that he is here and drove in from Belgium to be in our Storecove headquarters in the Netherlands. And today we will be presenting together with Serge Libert, who you see on the screen is a project manager at BOSA and is, I assume, quite a busy person these days because a lot is happening in Belgium. And the second one presenting is Ellen Cortvriend, who is from PwC, and she will give you a broader overview of the Belgian market and also the market around us. And as a third speaker, I will be speaking, and that's more about the solution that Storecove offers. But I'm really honored to have Serge and Ellen in this webinar. So thank you both. And Serge, I would like to leave the floor to you.
Thank you, Dolf. Good afternoon, everybody. So, as Dolf said, I am Serge Libert. I'm working for the Federal Public Service Policy and Support, in short, BOSA. What is BOSA? Yes, just I said, BOSA is a federal public service charged with different competencies, and I am more specifically working for simplification and digitalization, which is my directorate general. I'm managing projects at BOSA, formerly known as FEDIC, since 2003. So it's a long time already that I'm there. Before that, I've been employed by different companies like IBM, Citibank, and KPN. And since 2013, so it's quite a long journey, I'm focusing on the IT aspects related to the generalization of e-invoicing, and in particular, the payroll aspects and the role of the payroll authority. So that's also the reason why
Can I ask you one question? Because we can't see you. I'm not sure if Ellen can see you, but maybe...
I can see Serge, yeah.
Really? Okay. Then it must be with us. Okay, please go ahead.
Okay. And you also see the slides, Ellen, I assume.
Yeah, I can see them.
Okay. Then the technical side is fine. Okay, so that was a brief introduction of myself and the institution I'm working for. I was asked today to set a bit the scene, but from the policy point of view. And this is basically my most important slide. I do that based on this single slide most of the time to kind of situate why are we government busy with the invoicing? Can't we leave the enterprises alone? Well, yes, we could, but on the other hand, there is an immense potential in the invoices and in the invoicing processes when it comes to the digitalization of our enterprises. Someone, and I'm just quoting in, called the invoice the queen of documents, and that's what makes it so important to our digital future. It's because the invoice is a little bit at the crossroad of a lot of different processes. You have, of course, the sales process, because when you're selling something, you issue an invoice, otherwise you don't get the money. The accounting, it goes without saying, an invoice is an accounting document. The cash flow, because at the end of the day, the invoice represents money that goes out or that comes in. The taxation process, because the VAT is, sorry, there was a little bit of technical discussion here. The taxation process for the VAT aspects, it goes without saying that the invoice is a document that allows the collection of the VAT. Procurement, I said it was the sales process, but the procurement is also connected to invoices as well. Bank and finance, because, as I said, an invoice is representing money, money that you owe or that somebody owes you. So it's an important information in the context of the financing of the economy. And last but not least, and it's in red because in my last speech, I was informing the Court of Brussels about e-invoicing. well, this is also a legal department, so it can play a role in the digitalization of our juridical activities. So you can then see that the invoice has a very big span in terms of influence of our economy and our society. And that's what makes it so important for our digital future. It's also covering as well the administration, the enterprise, but also the households. And maybe now it's a bit of science fiction, but maybe in 10 years or 20 years, we will all have more improved use of digital tools, and households will also have electronic invoices. And in fact, they won't see the invoice anymore because it will all be handled by applications. And as a father of 4 children, I would really like to have a tool to help me manage all the invoices I receive. So I'm looking forward to that digital future. And the generalization of e-invoicing for the B2B in Belgium is an important stepping stone in this journey. A second slide, maybe to kind of summarize what we've been doing from the government point of view to generalize e-invoices. On the left side, you see the basic stats of Belgium, but I assume most of you guys, you know that as well as me. But okay, we have been busy for now more or less 12 years in rolling out e-invoicing progressively. The first 2 phases were more B2G, which is quite important to start somewhere, invoices to the government in the broader context of public procurement, which is a very specific context, and the 2 later phases were more led by our colleagues from VAT, and where we provide technical support to the intention to generalize the use of e-invoicing between VAT liables. Which the main outcome of that collaboration and that willingness from the VAT services to support this is the law of 6 February 24 that stipulates that all VAT liable entities must send and receive structured electronic invoice by 1st of January 26, and that provides a kind of 2-track process. What I call the first track, I call it the royal way. Why? Because it's the one that everybody can use without any additional need for agreement with the other parties. It's the common denominator solution, and it's the PayPal network. And it is not for nothing that the PayPal network has been selected. It is because it is designed to work that way. It offers broad interoperability, and that is in fact the absolute requirement if you want to get 1,200,000 enterprises to do e-invoicing. You need a highly interoperable approach. This being said, there are also situations where some enterprises, some business have a long practice of electronic data interchange, have invested a lot into this and need more time to go in the direction of full interoperability. And for these people, if there is a bilateral agreement between the sender and the receiver, then it is possible to do e-invoicing in another kind of network. But okay, it always requires a bilateral agreement, so it's typically something that is not meant to be used for people who are not doing e-invoicing already, but rather for the people who have been doing e-invoicing and EDI for decades, and they have those bilateral agreements in place, and they just need time to consider all the advantages of the standardization that is offered with the generalization of e-invoicing. Next slide. Two basic stats about the evolution of the e-invoice receiver. So the enterprise who are able to receive an invoice on the PayPal network, you see the evolution. So we are a little over 50%. probably 60%, because we need to go to 1,200,000 receivers, and we are close to 700,000. So it looks like it's going in the direction. I think we need to be reasonable. By the end of the year, we won't match the 1,200,000, but we get quite to a very satisfactory situation considering the challenge that we are taking and the tendency in Belgium to always wait for the last minute. So, and it's probably not only in Belgium, but in Belgium it's quite typical. So, so far, so good. We think that the figures are quite well. If we look at the international side of it, you see that we are in ranking 2 in terms of proportion of the receivers if you compare to the population of the country. Only Norway beats us, and Norway has been starting at more than 10 years ago, a global rollout. So I think that we are also doing well in this aspect. What stands behind that? I will go very fast into this. Actually, the PayPal network is a decentralized network, so it's like you are just selecting a connection point. We call that an access point, and these access points, they are operated by service provider, or actually the software itself can also be an access point. And there's no reason that the software that you are using for sending and receiving your invoices cannot be an access point, at least for the standardized flow. Or for more complex flow, that's a different story. There is no one size fits all in this story. But for quite simple scenarios, then it's just a software-to-software communication that will happen thanks to that decentralized model. And you see that we have a big growth in access points in Belgium. The histograms is only about the operators who are enrolled with the Belgian PayPal Authority, but there are also more or less 25 foreign service providers also active in Belgium, like Storecove, to not name one of these operators. Well, that closes my presentation. I want to keep it short and just by summarizing the message. We are not doing this just for the fun of it. We are doing this for boosting the digitalization of our enterprises, especially the small and medium business and our society and also our administration. And to do this, we need a common agreement at national level. That is what is provided by the B2B mandate. It's just a law that acknowledges a collective agreement to use an interoperable framework, PayPal, that kind of gives direction to all the people to see how they need to do this challenge. And the PayPal is the technical foundation of this project. Thank you. I give back the word to Dolf.
Yes, thank you so much, Serge. Really interesting, and also really interesting to see a bit of the history of how Belgium got here. And as I understand, also for Open PEPL itself, Belgium is really exciting to follow, because this is a stress test for the full PEPL network. Volumes are serious, so exciting to see what will happen in January. But thank you so much. To the listeners, I would like to say, if you have questions for Serge, please ask them in the chat. I imagine that Serge is very busy and that, let's say, in 10 minutes he would like to leave. If you want to stay, Serge, free to do so. But anyhow, thank you so much for your presentation. And I would like to switch to Ellen. Ellen from PwC. She presented before in these webinars, and it's really interesting. So Ellen, I would like to leave the floor to you.
Thank you so much, Dolf. And also from my side, warm welcome to everyone joining us today during this webinar. I don't know, Dolf, will you share my slide deck, or am I able to click through? whilst you're doing that, maybe short introduction, on myself. I'm a partner at PwC in Belgium, part of the indirect tax technology team. So I will very much focus on, let's say, the regulatory aspects that are linked to the Belgian e-invoicing mandate as part of the webinar. Whilst, of course, the technicalities have already been dealt with in great detail by Serge before, so I will not repeat that one. I will talk about in a nutshell, what will be changing. I will keep that part rather short because, as Dolf mentioned, we already did a couple of these webinars before, where I explained into the very detail, okay, what is in scope, what is the exact process. We're, of course, super close to the deadline, which is, as you know, 1st of January 26. So I will really try to focus now on what's new, some new developments that have occurred since our last webinar, because the government kept us rather busy last week by a number of publications they did, and I will share all about that later on. Maybe just as a short recap, Serge already referred to it. So as from 1st of January 26, what will happen in Belgium? Well, in principle, every invoice will have to be issued in a structured electronic format. It's really a big bang rollout that will happen. We've seen in other jurisdictions that they have gone for a waived approach based on size of company, for instance, based on specific transactions. Here it is really big bang. Everyone who falls in scope of the mandate will have to start sending and receiving structured electronic invoices, whereby PEPL will become the default standard for exchanging those documents. But again, there is flexibility to also opt out from the default system in case you have the agreement of your counterparties. It means that, where you are today sending paper documents, PDFs via email, or using other unstructured formats, that will no longer be possible for all these transactions that will be in scope of the mandates. And over time, and I will explain a bit on how that may look like over time, the e-invoicing mandate will be supplemented, will be complemented by an e-reporting obligation, whereby also the invoice information or part of that invoice information will be shared in close to real time with the government. How that will look like in detail is unfortunately not yet known up to now. We have some hints and I will share those with you, but the full technicalities, they are still to be made available by the governments. I talked in detail during last webinar about the scope of the mandate, just to keep it short, and it's an important assessment that each and every one of you needs to do to really understand, okay, do I fall for this or that transaction in scope of what is coming? Basically, you need to combine three elements in there to make that assessment. You need to look at the supplier capacity, the buyer capacity, and the nature of the transaction. In a nutshell, supplier and buyer must be Belgian established and VAT-registered companies to be part of the scope of the mandate. I think that's a very important criterion already. There are some exceptions where even if this would be the case, the scope or the mandate would not apply, and that is mainly linked to the exempt status of certain transactions. If, for instance, you as a supplier are only performing VAT-exempt transactions according to a specific article of the Belgian VAT Code, Article 44, which may be, for instance, medical services or financial services. In case you are only doing that, then you may still fall outside of scope of the mandate. But for all other activities, it means that your transaction will, in principle, be invoiced via a structured electronic invoice with PEPL as the default system. So that is an important assessment that you need to do for your transactions at hand. Once you know that, you of course need to understand, okay, what does it mean technically? How will I be affected? And there, as Serge already explained, PEPL is really the default system that will be used for exchanging structured electronic invoices. It is an international thing. It's not something that has been invented in Belgium or for Belgium alone. No, it's already quite widely used and known also internationally. The system is based on a connect once, connect to all principle. It means that once you have chosen your access point provider, which may be even your accounting platform, your ERP solution, or an external PEPL access point, once you have appointed that one, they will be the ones responsible for making sure that the invoice is transmitted into the right format, which is in this case PEPL BIS UBL format, over the PEPL framework, or over the PEPL network, which is really a virtual network, so to say, and is received by the access point that has been selected by the buyer. So that is how it will work in phase one. You also see a glimpse of the future, because I already told you the authorities will not stop there. By, in principle, January 28, they want to add e-reporting on top of the e-invoicing requirements, which means that the access point providers you will be using today will also be the ones in the future responsible for extracting the tax information that the government wants to receive and for submitting that information to the so-called corner 5, which would be the government in this case, that would receive part of the invoice or the full invoice detail, depending on how that will look like going forward. So an important one, I think, to consider when you are, of course, selecting your access point provider today, first of all, and secondly, also an important element to consider in terms of data quality, because what you transmit or send over the PEPL network today will in the future also be sent simultaneously to the authorities. So, of course, you want to be sure and certain about the quality of that data that you will be submitting. I talked, and Serge also talked about the opt-out possibility. So it is possible to deviate from using PEPL, but in this case, you need to have mutual agreement between supplier and buyer to do so. Does it mean that you can send whatever type of invoice if you opt out from PEPL? No, it will in any case have to be a structured electronic invoice that has to be sent, and compliance with the so-called European norm will be required. So that is a specific standard that is also be used in order to, of course, ensure interoperability and the right level of detail in the information that will be exchanged. How you will transmit your information in that case, how the invoice will be exchanged, that part is not regulated, only that compliance with that European standard is what is regulated. Oh, sorry, I think I skipped the slides. Dolf, if you would be so kind to put them back on, thank you so much. That was my mistake. All right, so where are we today? Serge already showed you the statistics. We talked about the number of VAT established companies in Belgium, which are indeed 1.2 million. The figures are a bit different if you listen to the one or the other person. Some talk about 900K companies that need to be registered. Some say it's 1.2 million companies that would have to be registered. I think it is clear that there is still a bit of work to do, knowing that, as the statistics shown, we're now at 680K companies that are registered on PEPL, so more than half, but still we're a month before the deadline. A bit of work to do, but the authorities, as is being outlined here, compare it a bit with a reverse hockey stick type of approach, where you see, and that's also what we've seen in other jurisdictions like Italy that have implemented a mandate, that companies indeed wait very long before they actually go live with these systems, and that in the last months or even days before the actual go live, we see the numbers increasing a lot. So we're indeed very hopeful that there will be a positive effect and that we will indeed be closer to that 900K or 1.2 million target that we discussed about. What are some of the recent changes that I think are super relevant for everyone to know? First of all, the authorities have announced last week a tolerance period. So they announced that there will be a 3-month grace period applied, which is of course subject to conditions. It's important to understand that there is no general postponement of the mandate. That will still kick off as from 1st of January 26. But in case you as a company have taken already timely and reasonable steps to comply, and what that looks like will always be a bit of a subjective discussion, let's say, during an audit, then, in case you are, for instance, still missing the technical capabilities to send or receive your structured e-invoice, or you are unable to issue a valid e-invoice because your system is not ready, because your solution provider is not ready, which can apply to all your transactions, but it can also apply to certain specific flows. I think, for instance, about self-billing, where some of the access point providers do not have yet the full functionality available. Then the authorities have said, well, we will not start applying penalties as from day one for that non-compliance. No, in case you can show, okay, we have taken steps, we have done our best to comply with the mandate, but have not fully succeeded. During the first 3 months, there will not be any penalties for that non-compliance. So I think, that buys, let's say, a little bit of time for those companies that are a bit struggling to meet the 1st of January deadline. An important other recent change that is that also the draft e-invoicing legislation, it is legislation covering multiple VAT-related topics, but also some aspects around e-invoicing are included in that draft legislation. What does it say? Well, first of all, it mentions that non-established entities that only have a Belgian VAT identification number, that they will be excluded from the scope of the mandate. If you remember what I said before, I already said that. So it really applies only to established VAT-registered companies. But in the legislation still, there was a reference that for the receipt of invoices, you could also fall in scope in case you only have a VAT registration number in Belgium. So the authorities already orally confirmed that that would not be the case, that they will amend that in the final version of the legislation. And it has now been indeed formally excluded that these companies will not fall in scope of the mandate. So this is a good confirmation there. Things, however, may change once e-reporting will be implemented. Then also the e-reporting may be applicable in case you are, as a foreign company, only VAT registered in Belgium, but not considered VAT established. So keep an eye on the scope going forward. But for now, not in scope. What was also included in that draft legislation, I think that's also an important aspect, that is that in case you are, as a supplier, as an invoice issuer, unable to issue a structured e-invoice to your buyer because they are unable to receive one, that you are released from the obligation to issue that structured e-invoice. And it is clearly mentioned that in that case, a regular e-invoice or a regular paper invoice can still be issued. So if, for instance, as a supplier, you notice, well, this is a transaction in scope of the PEPL mandate, but my buyer is not yet registered on PEPL, then you have the ability to still send them a paper or a PDF via email type of document, and you will not be penalized as a supplier in case you do so. The third element that was included in that draft legislation is that the go-live dates, that remains unchanged, and that the draft legislation does not consider any further transitional measures that would be applicable. But do remember what I mentioned on the last slide, on the previous slide, about that 3 months grace period. So I think those are a number of aspects that I think are recently changed or reconfirmed, which are important for you to take along in your preparation going forward. Maybe a few FAQs, a number of questions that we often receive from clients in preparation for the mandates. I think one of them I already answered. What if my customer is not ready? I noticed indeed my customer is not registered on PEPL yet. You may, and that is also confirmed based on that draft legislation, use another transmission method to send your invoice towards your buyer. But it is still important that you as a supplier also try to encourage your buyer to become indeed compliant with PEPL. You could make also a specific statement on your invoice, making it clear that indeed, in principle, this invoice should have been sent over PEPL. So please take the necessary preparations, do the necessary preparations to comply with the requirement going forward. But again, you will not be penalized for non-compliance here, because of course you cannot influence whether or not your customer is compliant with the mandates. The other way around is also a question that I often receive. What if my supplier is not ready? They are still sending me a PDF document via email, for instance, after 1st of January, or in this case, after 1st of April, I should say, taking into account the grace period. Should I still accept that, or can I simply refuse to pay that invoice? Well, theoretically, you have indeed the right to refuse that invoice, but of course, there is also commercially, the link with your suppliers, and it's not always possible commercially to really refuse that invoice or all invoices that are coming from your supplier. So it means that whether or not you are still accepting an invoice that is not compliant with PEPL, that is a commercial decision. But of course, the supplier in this case, they risk to be penalized. Your right to deduct, which is often a question we're also getting, if I receive an invoice which is not compliant with the structured e-invoice requirement, will I not lose my right to deduct as a buyer? Well, there, of course, there are substance over form criteria that could say, well, your right to deduct is safeguarded also in this case. However, also here, I think it's important to really encourage as much as you can your suppliers to also comply with the requirements. The third one, can I try to streamline my process and also send structured invoices for those transactions that are not in scope of the mandate? And there, of course, you can. You can also use PEPL for instance, cross-border transactions, which are not in scope of the mandate, as you saw on the scope slide before, or for any other type of transactions that are not in scope. But there, of course, the general principles apply, meaning that you need to have the acceptance of your counterparties to do so. However, it is also clearly mentioned in the FAQs from the government that in case your buyer, for instance, your foreign buyer as an example, is registered on PEPL, that could even be considered as an implicit acceptance that they accept to receive your invoice via PEPL. So that's an important one to take on board. How to treat transactions that are invoiced during the cutover period. We're very close to the end of the year period. Should I still accept? What type of documents will I start seeing coming in as from 1st of January? Well, of course, things get a bit more complicated based on that grace period. Whereas in the past, I would have said, following 1st of January, the only invoices that should come in are structured invoices according to the new legislation. Here, based on the tolerance period, that could last a bit longer until 1st of April. Let's say you can still see a mix of documents coming in. But as from that moment in time, in principle, only structured electronic invoices should still be received. The only exceptions that may exist are credit notes, which relate to invoices that have been issued in 2025, but which are corrected in 2026. There it has been made clear that the credit note can follow the same format as you have used for your original invoice. If that has been sent out as a PDF, for instance, then also the credit note can be sent out as a PDF document. But aside from that, everything needs to be structured electronically invoiced, as I referred to before. And then maybe a last question, and then I will hand it back over to you, Dolf, to see whether there are any questions in the chat coming in, because I saw a lot of activity there, I think. Yeah, what are the pros and cons of following the opt-out possibility? Why should I not go for PEPL as a default, but use the opt-out? Well, in certain cases, you may have already implemented, let's say, an EDI setup with your suppliers or your buyers, where it makes more sense to stick to that process rather than trying to transform it to the new PEPL way of working. However, a clear con of that mechanism will, of course, be once e-reporting kicks off, because you have seen that e-reporting will most likely build further on PEPL again, whereby the PEPL access points will transmit invoice information in real time towards the government. Yeah, if you have opted out of using PEPL, this may give some difficulties to then be able to report your transactional data in real time towards the government. Again, how that will look like, that is not yet known at this point in time, because the legislation there is still pending. So that's a clear con. But of course, the pro is definitely that you can stick to what you already have and know today. That really is a commercial decision that you as a company would need to make in combination, of course, with your suppliers or buyers respectively. So I think that were, in a nutshell, Dolf, a few FAQ questions that I often receive from clients, and also some news items that I think are important, especially from a timing perspective. But maybe as a last call out, the date has not changed. We are still bound to that 1st of January 26. That leaves us not much time anymore. So really do whatever you can as a company, to make sure that you are ready for the go live as from 1st of January 26. That would be my warm invitation, let's say, to the audience here today.
Yes, thank you so much, Ellen. Yes, very clear and a wonderful presentation again. So thank you so much. To the listeners, again, you see that the presentation is downloadable, but mainly, like Ellen said, if you have questions for her, please ask those in the chat, and she can then still answer those during the last part of the session. And as Ellen said, we don't have much time left. Belgium doesn't have much time left, but we have another 5.5 minutes. So I'll quickly switch to our presentation, Storecove's presentation, which I will do together with Job. I will do some slides and Job will do some others. So as an introduction, shortly about Storecove, these are the countries where we have offices, where we have entities. Down in the bottom, you see the mandate dates for Belgium, of course, B2B and CTC. And you see VIDA explained. So VIDA, Vet in the Digital Age, meaning that actually we're trying to close the European tax gap. And the end game there being that all tax authorities will need to report to one central hub called VIS. And that is what this is all working towards. So now it's Belgium and more countries to follow with those CTC mandates where you need to report to the tax authority. The wave you just saw represents the number of companies that need to register on the PEPL network. And as you understand, in Belgium, the number is, as Serge showed, near to 700,000 out of 1.2 million. So that's really a big chunk, of course, of what's happening on the PEPL network in total. To give you an idea, I think Belgium at the moment is around 2 million documents exchanging over the PEPL network in total per month. And the total PEPL network does 28 million per month. And so Belgium is really a big part of the total PEPL invoice volume at the moment. What you see here on the slide is what is driving the adoption of networks. So on the one hand, B2B mandates, on the other hand, the CTC mandates, where you need to report to the tax authority. And also you need to report to the tax authority because as a supplier, when you receive an invoice without a certificate, some countries might even state, then you're not allowed to deduct the taxes. And so that's a real driver, of course, even for the receiver to make sure that their supplier is compliant with the local regulations. You see the two open exchange networks here, PEPL being the open exchange network we all know in Europe, Asia, now also moving to Africa. So PEPL is really growing nicely. And then in the US, there's the DBNA network, Digital Business Networks Alliance. It's also an open exchange network, but with a different governance. So Digital Business Network Alliance is industry-led, where PEPL is more government-led. Storecove as a service provider is certified on both networks, meaning that as a user or participant, when you sign up with Storecove, we bring you the reach over the two networks. So just adding a different identifier in an invoice brings that you can send to a US company and via PEPL, sometimes to a company in Japan or Australia or in Belgium. And so the network, actually the service provider in that sense is the switch between the two open exchange networks. And maybe in the future, there will be other open exchange networks, and then service providers will be switched to even more networks. This is what we call the four corner models. Well, Ellen explained this quite a bit already, with the fifth corner model also being the tax authority. But the special thing about open exchange networks is the dynamic lookup. The fact that you can ask the network based on the identifier, is this identifier present? And if so, where is it situated? And what format would you like to receive? And so that, of course, is really special, that two-way communication on the network. And that really brings that open exchange networks operate globally compared to closed networks, the legacy networks that work more like closed networks, point to point, and have less tendency to grow globally. Because with a closed network, when you like to switch to another network, all your suppliers and all your receivers also have to change network. And with open exchange networks, that's not the case. You have, I think, 850 service providers on the PEPL network at the moment. You can switch whatever you want, but your receivers and your customers will be on the same network, your suppliers and your customers, sorry. So this is Storecove. I think the main thing here to emphasize is maturity. We're in this space for over 10 years and growing towards other countries, which I'll explain shortly. And our technical department is involved in all sorts of PEPL work groups, but also DBNA work groups, so quite up to date with all the data that's relevant. Here you see an overview of the type of customers that Storecove serves. So mainly we focus on financial solutions, ERP systems, accountancy software, accounts payable, but also, of course, the international operating companies that just need to connect for certain mandate reasons. Well, Belgium, of course, being a big example of why companies at these days, this moment in time, need to connect to open exchange networks. The average customer size does, as you see here, 300,000 to 400,000 documents per year. We host in Dublin with Amazon, and we host, for instance, for France, where that is a compliancy rule, we host with Secnum Cloud, because in France you need to have local hosting by a French-owned hosting provider, and that's what Secnum Cloud is. And we're ISO certified, and as I learned, OpenPEPL will make this mandatory soon for service providers. And for that reason, it's good to have a service provider that is ISO certified, because I expect there will be a big shakeout of service providers that are not certified yet. Hey, that looks like the same slide. This is the slide I wanted to show. Job, can I leave the floor to you?
Yeah, and indeed, like you mentioned, Dolf, we have a very mature solution. I think that shows as well in our key differentiators, because we know the market is a bit flooded with all kinds of e-invoicing solutions. So how do we as Storecove really set ourselves apart from competition? I think the first one, transparent by design, meaning in essence, at the moment you come into contact with us as Storecove, as your e-invoice end-to-end e-invoicing provider, we essentially give you the keys to the kingdom already. We are fully transparent in our software, in our documentation. Your developers can very easily understand the logic and the work that needs to be done. I'll talk about that in a minute as well. but it also brings us to seamless self-service. We give you the keys to the kingdom, but we also make sure that you will have all the tools that you need in order to really be a global end-to-end e-invoicing solution. What does that mean? That talks not only about actual e-invoicing, but also, for example, archiving, especially in those more complex countries like, for example, France and Italy, but also an easy-to-use user interface. We know that companies have a strong demand for a good user interface. I think we even have a slide on that in a minute as well. But that shows that we are really ready to also cater for the big companies and also the cloud accounting solutions, of course, where we're very strong with a market share of, I think, over 16% in Belgium today. We're in the top 3 of e-invoicing providers. Next one, a fast track deployment. I think it's an important one, especially looking at the date where we are. It's still 3 weeks to go before the deadline. Can you have a solution ready in 3 weeks? We as Storecove, we say yes, you can do it even within a week. It takes maximum up to 6 weeks, depending on how fast the implementation is being done by either an in-house team or a developer. And that ties a bit back to that first point, because we are so transparent in what we do, because we create a sandbox environment where you can just test as of day one, you will see how fast that it goes by opting for Storecove. And that brings us to the last point. If in any case the documentation is not clear enough, we offer personal support as well. We have our help desks, we have our account executives that will follow up on your account, on your needs throughout the years. And yeah, it's very easily to show because we have an effective turnover rate of our ticket resolution within 7 hours of logging the tickets. The ticket gets closed by our help desk. So I think that's quite clear. And this just shows a bit the user interface that we currently use. We are every day also optimizing that interface by listening to the requests of the people. For example, filtering, adding more filters, adding a document trail, all those things are on the roadmap so that we can adhere to all the needs that you might have. So that's some of the things that we are working on. Exciting stuff, I would say.
Okay, thank you, Job. I know that we're over time, so we'll speed up a bit. This shows the process of sending an ERP system connected to the API with JSON data. You see the sales invoice. If the entity is situated in a country where you need to report, we will report to the tax authority, get the certificate back, and with that certificate included, we offer the invoice to the open exchange networks. When there's no reply, so meaning when there's no recipient on the network, alternatively, we can send via email. And when we send via email, we will add the local commonly used format for email. That could be Zugveert, but it could also be UBL or Factor X. But we automatically generate that. And like in the discussion before in the chat, if the sender adds a PDF, we will add that as an attachment also in the email. The archiving API that you see to the left brings that the document as it is delivered can also be retrieved and stored in your own system. So it really is a two-way way of communication between the ERP systems. Here you see the same for receiving the other way around. The only difference here being the archiving API, as here the archiving API webhook based brings that you can retrieve whichever document type in the format that it was sent to you. And so that's for tax compliancy relevant to store specifically that document like it was sent to you. And we offer special local archiving services for France and for Italy as a separate add-on, as that again is a compliance regulation in those countries. Yep.
Yeah, and here I think this again shows a bit of the maturity that we are dealing with. So here you see the countries that we as Storecove support from an e-invoicing point of view. So you see, and Belgium is obviously on there. France is a recent addition. We became certified in France as well, which is excellent news.
Platform agréé.
Yeah, yep. Exactly. So that's great news. You see, we have plenty of other countries there as well. USA, UK, which is coming in 2029. April of 2029 has been confirmed now. So all very interesting stuff that has been going on. Maybe if you move to the next slide, Dolf. Yes. These are also the supported C2C countries. We are, of course, every day adding on to that list. I think we're adding Croatia is coming, UAE is coming as well, Denmark with NAM Haldenul, but you again see that Belgium, France, Finland with Finvoice, etc., etc. So quite a few countries that we are dealing with, and also based on the request of our customers and our leads, we are extending that list on a daily basis.
Yeah, and to be honest, Belgium takes up a lot of time at the moment. A lot of customers that want to connect in the last phase towards 1st of January. So those countries that we are working on, like Mexico and Croatia, like you said, and Denmark and France and UAE, they're all slowing down just for this month because we need so much time for Belgium. So that is the success of Belgium at the moment. These are, let's say, our focus customers by default. So because we are really an API connectivity partner. So you see that it's financial systems and OCR and billing systems that connect to our API. And we work with integrators that connect to our API once and then can repeatedly just generate a new API key per customer. So that also makes it really easy for the customers to connect with these ERP systems. Special features, we spoke a lot about invoices, of course, but the network Peppol supports other document types, also orders, as does Storecove. Invoice response, what you see to the right, statuses via webhooks again, notifications that you receive, not only rejected or accepted, but also authorized, set for payment paid. So interesting managerial information that you can use for cash flow forecasting, factoring, stuff like that. Finvoice and Nemhandel, we support. Those are two closed networks operated or used a lot by many businesses in Finland, respectively Denmark. They do support Peppol in both countries, but Peppol is still, let's say around 10%, and these closed networks are around 90% of the business in those countries. So these are important. And pre-agreed is a sort of parallel that both Peppol and DBNA are testing beside the networked model, which is actually a sort of point-to-point connection that companies like to use over the open exchange networks. And this called Peppol Enhanced B2B on the Peppol network and pre-agreed on the DBNA network brings that you can also support old document types which you already agreed on with your counterpart, like Edifact and like you see here, X12 and PyDex. So, but it's a parallel, it's all in testing, even with Peppol. There are no cases yet, but it would be logical to also support those large invoice volumes and support those by means of the Peppol network by, for instance, the good validation, the encryption, the identifiers, everything that has already been defined on those networks. This I will just skip. It's more technically how the API is connected and how an integrator or an in-house developer is needed to make that API connection with the RESTful JSON API. And then I end with the last slide, and this actually gives you an overview of all the services you get when you connect to the Storecove RESTful JSON API. And so to the left, you see we support not only the e-invoice, but also the hybrid formats like Zugpferd and Factor X. Zugpferd, for instance, in Germany, you can also receive. We receive that via an email address and ingest that in the API. And by doing that, you are compliant with the German receiving mandate regulation. In the middle, you see that we support both networks, different document types, syntaxes like UVL, but also CII. And to the right, you see that you're VIDA compliant now, but also VIDA compliant for the future. And that is because from that data set that you connect your ERP with, the JSON data, we can generate whichever global e-invoice format, but we can also generate the subsets that tax authorities need. And that means that, of course, now we generate subsets for Romania and Spain and Portugal, all sorts of tax authorities that have introduced CTC already. But also when future tax authorities will introduce reporting, you are technically already done and ready for the new tax authority because we create the subset out of the same data that you already supplying us with, the JSON data. So that's the whole proposition. I think it was a fantastic presentation, especially due to Serge, who already left, but who was present, Ellen, you from PwC, and Job, your Belgian accent gave this a bit of flair. So thank you all. And if you have some questions, please add those in the chat. And otherwise, you find the handouts. You will receive the video recording of this webinar. And I want to thank you very much and hope to see you soon.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.
Welcome. Bye.